Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every disease and sickness.
The Bible contains remarkable stories of miracles and divine interventions. Moses parted the sea. Peter healed a man lame from his mother's womb. Jesus drove demons out of people and raised others from the dead. But are these types of events still happening today?
We too have a beam of divine light and guidance that God has put within the heart of every man. And it's one of the greatest proofs that there is a God.
More amazing supernatural things are happening than we realize.
This is Divine Intervention, the interview show that features intriguing people who've experienced the hand of God in amazing ways. Divine Intervention was created and produced with the purpose of encouraging believers, spiritual seekers, and skeptics alike that Jesus is alive and is still performing miracles and working in the world today.
I believe in miracles.
Here's your host, Daniel Fazzina.
Welcome to Divine Intervention Radio. That's right, I am your host, Daniel Fazzina. So excited to be with you. Got another amazing guest in store for you who I know is going to encourage you. And he's got some really cool testimonies to share about how God is using him and his prophetic gift. You're going to really be encouraged by his story. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you, you can always find us online. DivineInterventionRadio.com is the web address, DivineInterventionRadio.com. Also on Facebook, Facebook.com/Divine Intervention Radio. You can connect with me on Twitter at Daniel Fazzina1 on Twitter.com. That's Daniel Fazzina, the numeral 1 on Twitter.com. And of course, you can email me, divineintervention@mail.com. Maybe the show has encouraged you. Maybe it's pointed you to Jesus. Maybe it's helped you to actually take that step of faith and put your faith in Christ for the first time. If so, I would love to know about it. Please hit me up, divineintervention@mail.com. All right, our guest today is none other than Hubie Synn. He's a friend of mine. He is an author, an accountant by trade, and a prophet. God has gifted him with an amazing gift of prophecy, and he's going to share his story about how that developed and how God connected him with some really amazing, famous people and gave them prophetic words that have come to pass. He's got a new book out that's called Tales of a Wandering Prophet, and I think it's going to really encourage you. So without any further ado, let's get to our special guest, Mr. Hubie Synn. Hubie, welcome to Divine Intervention Radio. You are on. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here again. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I really enjoyed our talk last time you were on the show, and so much has happened with you since we spoke then. You've got a new book out called Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory, and we certainly want to get to that. But for anyone who missed our talk last time, let's back up to the beginning, and why don't you share a little bit about your background and your testimony? How did you come to know the Lord in the first place?
Well, my mother was kind of, she was into the Catholic faith, and as time went on, she kind of, wasn't totally, comfortable with everything. Mm-hmm. And so she began searching for more, and so she, got involved with, a born-again person who, was in the neighborhood. And that kind of led her down the path of, seeking God more, wanting more of God. And that kind of led her down the road to being born again. And so, as a child or as a young adult, my mother used to drag us to church, literally. And, we used to go to these churches, and I would see people with their hands in the air and speaking a weird language and stuff, and I didn't know what to make of it. And, my mother was always just, having us in church, so, I never realized until later that, that planted a lot of seeds because it wasn't like I was totally new to it.
Right.
And then, Scripture says, train up a child, and when he gets old, he will not depart. Well, that kind of happened to me because, I was a very rebellious teenager because my parents got divorced, and I was just very angry over a lot of things. Mm. And then as, time went on, I went to college, got married. And then, my wife and I, we were doing okay financially, and we were doing okay with life, so I didn't think much of looking for God. And then, one day we were going out to eat, and then we went to a grocery store, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and then we were going down the road, and all of a sudden, I heard a loud bang.
Uh-oh.
And then when I heard this loud bang, I didn't know what happened. I saw that, my wife screamed, and, I saw the windshield started to crack.
Oh, boy.
And everything started to go in slow motion. And, I'm seeing the window crack. I hear my wife scream. And, I see her, and, I see her that she's just, she had this look in her eye that she was scared. So, it was funny because right before that, my wife was always one about who would always wear a seatbelt. And, she wasn't wearing her seatbelt, and it got kind of strange because I was like, well, why aren't you wearing your seatbelt? Because I usually did. And she said, well, I just don't feel like it. And it's kind of one of those things that if you're married and your wife sounds annoyed, you really don't want to keep talking to her.
Yeah, I've had that experience once or twice, in 10 years.
So I didn't want to press the issue, but I just thought it was strange. And I said, well, why aren't you wearing it? She goes, I just don't feel like it. And I was like, okay, just, you mad at me? And she's like, no, I'm not mad at you. So, and then the loud bang happened. So because of that, she wasn't really strapped into her seat. So I was able to actually, as we were at the store, I bought this beaded seat cover. And this seat cover was just to make it more comfortable because it was in June, actually. And, I had this beaded seat cover, which was pretty slippery, but it kept you off the seat, so it kept you cooler because my car had no air conditioning. Okay. And so we're driving along, and this loud bang happens, and when the loud bang happens, my wife screams. I am in this beaded seat cover. I actually slid over to the gear shift, and I saw her. I saw the windows started to crack, and I grabbed her, pulled her down, and leaned over her because, her window started to crack also. And, not really knowing what happened, but I know that the glass from her window, we were hit so hard by another car that the glass went across the car, and I had a little Mustang, and it broke my window. And so I had glass all over my back, but at least I was able to kind of yank her down and cover her, so, it could have been a lot worse if she would have had her seatbelt on, or if I had mine on, and if I hadn't have bought that seat cover. So,
interesting. The circumstances coming together there, because usually they say, wearing your seatbelt actually reduces chance of injury by quite a lot. But there's always exceptions to the rule,
Yeah, and I mean, and my wife was avid and always asking me, you should wear your seatbelt, you're going to get hurt, and, and for her not to, it was kind of like, God kind of set that up. So we were sitting in the ambulance, and, I couldn't feel my legs, which later I had surgery on them, but it could have been a lot worse if I didn't have that seat cover. It could have really messed up my back and stuff. And, you kind of look at it and you're kind of saying, well, the guy hit the front fender all the way back quarter panel, and the car looked like a V. I mean, it looked like we should have died. And you're looking at the car, you're in the ambulance, and you're okay, and you're kind of thinking, I think I really should have been severely injured more, or we could have died. And when you kind of look at all the circumstances of what happened, you kind of say, well, there's something more to this.
Right.
And, I kind of said, well, God spared us, so we really need to kind of get right because it was such a scary thing. And obviously he protected us.
Right.
There's really no explanation for it. So
it's amazing how traumatic circumstances can often wake us up and say, hey, we need to get right with the Lord. And a lot of people, that's what happens. Even though sometimes trauma pushes some people further from God and they get angry at God and stuff. But in this case, obviously it kind of made you want to seek after him.
Right, and I think the fact that my mother had dropped the seeds, I kind of knew there was something more.
Right.
So, we started looking, and actually I was actually the scout person. I started going to all the churches in the area. And, just kind of seeing what was around, and, and some were, Presbyterian. I remember going to a Catholic church and a Methodist, and, I was just trying to find the right place.
Right.
And, you went to these places and they gave you the cards. I wasn't putting my real phone number or address because I didn't want anybody chasing me, And so I'm still trying to find my way here.
Right.
So, it's bad enough that they make you stand up or raise your hand. You know what I mean? Which really don't want to do.
Oh, you're a visitor, first time. Fill out this card.
Exactly. And everybody's looking at you, So that kind of, after a little while, we settled on a Methodist church, which was around the area, and that kind of got us going, learning and seeking God. And
All right, and then so as I guess you got plugged in and you started reading the Bible, and you just you grow in your faith, right? It's not like an overnight thing for a lot of people.
Right. We just started kind of learning, and, we met great people there, and they were very friendly to us and welcomed us with open arms, and we became part of that congregation for a few years, and it was great.
Awesome. Friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio, and we are visiting with my good friend Hubie Synn, who is a speaker and an author and a prophet. His book is called The Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory. Hubie was on the show a while ago, and we're kind of recapping his story, but a lot has happened since we talked to him. His new book has come out, obviously, and God has really expanded his territory and really given him a lot of favor with many people, and he's able to minister to a lot of people with his prophetic gift. So Hubie, and in this church, you started growing, and is this the church where you were serving in the nursery with the children?
No, this was the beginning of our walk. It's kind of like we were taking baby steps, and then we were there for a little while, and we kind of wanted, like my mother did, we wanted more.
Right.
So one day my wife was at work, and, she was very angry, and she went into the bathroom, and she slammed the door, and she said, "Jesus, help me." And out from the stall pops this woman who says, "Oh, you're saved." So it's kind of like, whoops. So then she's like, "Oh, so am I." So then she invited us to her church. And, when we went to her church, well, my wife went first. When my wife went to her church, that she came home and she had fire in her eyes that I'd never seen before. And so, she's like, "You got to go, you got to go, you got to go." And I was like, yeah, I'll get to it. It was tax season or whatever.
That's right, you're an accountant by trade.
Yes, so she was going on and on and on, and I said, okay, well, I'll check it out, because, being a guy in marriage, you don't really want your wife pulling you somewhere. You want to kind of be the leader type of stuff.
Right.
So, I let her lead, so I said, okay. So I went, and when I went, there was a guy who was preaching, and, it was during the week, and he's preaching, and all of a sudden he's like, "Well, there's somebody here that, you have a decision to make." And I'm like, "Well, okay, no, this is new." And then he continues on speaking, and all of a sudden he stops and he goes, "I just don't know what it is, but somebody here, you're supposed to do something, and it's not right." Everybody's looking around, and and meanwhile, in the back of my head, one of my best friends is getting married on Friday. This was like a Wednesday night service. And, he's having a bachelor party and all that stuff, and I'm the only one married,
Okay.
He got this whole thing scheduled, and I'm like, yeah, this could be, it could kind of sort of fit. And then he goes, "You're really uncomfortable." And I went, that kind of fits too. So then he continues speaking, and then he goes, "You're going to do it anyway, but you're not going to be the same." And, and everybody around the congregation, it wasn't that big. They're all looking at each other like, I wonder who that could be,
Don't you love that?
Yeah, exactly. So, I went to the bachelor party. My friends are doing whatever they're doing, and I'm hanging out at a bar across the street, or, I'm just sitting in the car and stuff. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling, because I wasn't part of, what they're doing. So... And then it just didn't feel right, and it's just everything the guy said, it was totally spot on for me. So then I said, okay, well, we'll go back to this church, since there's no way that guy could have known that. And it was many years later that I went up to the guy, and I said, "Do you remember you did that?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Normally people usually come up and tell me it's about them." He goes, "To this day, nobody's ever come up." And I was like, well... It was me. And I told him the story, and he just started laughing. He's like, "I never would have guessed." I was like, well, I was kind of doing my best to kind of avoid it.
That is funny. I had a kind of a similar experience, not with the prophetic in that way, but, going to my good friend's bachelor party. Mm-hmm. Where I'm married, and I'm the only one that's saved out of the group, and I was driving everybody. I had to drop them off at their strip club and go wait, down the block for an hour or whatever it was. I wasn't going to go in. And some of the guys asked me, like, "How come you're not coming in?" I was like, "Well, it's just disrespectful to my wife, and I just don't need to do it." And I hope and pray that made some sort of impact. I could see on a couple of guys' faces their curiosity. But, and God puts us in situations like that where we're going to be around people who are not saved. And let's face it, we can't expect people who are secular or not followers of Jesus to act like Jesus.
Yeah, or to understand also.
Yeah, sometimes they won't understand, and they just think this is what guys do at bachelor parties. And I was like, well, you know what? You guys, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm not going to be part of it. So I waited for them, outside. And
especially if you're the only one married, because they don't understand.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I was the only one. I think I might have been the only one married there.
Okay.
Maybe. No, I think there was one other guy who was married, but I was definitely the only one who was saved.
Oh, okay.
So, but
I was the only one married and the only one saved. So.
Okay. Well, gosh, God puts us in all different types of situations where we can be salt and light in a broken world, and that's what we have to do the best we can. So, getting back to your story, I mean, God is obviously speaking through this minister about you, and you're going along, and but how did you're known right now for having a gift of prophecy, and this is an interesting story. But how did you actually develop that gift? I'm assuming we have to fast forward a little bit here.
Yes, it kind of just happened. I went to a show. That church was a show business church, and that church where I attended, it was actually in a recording studio for a little while. So,
what do you mean a show business church?
A lot of people that were in show business went there, like Donna Summer used to go there, Roberta Flack.
Okay.
A lot of models, a lot of people there were in Broadway shows.
Okay.
So, I mean, everybody was singing and dancing and who's who, and then you have an accountant. so it necessarily didn't make me fit in.
Okay.
And, I was like, wow, it's great to listen to them sing and stuff, which was great, but it was kind of like, I don't feel part of this stuff. So, I sat in the back because I didn't feel like I could contribute much.
Mm.
And, they didn't understand me because they think differently, very creative people than, straightforward accountants. It's not like you have a lot to talk about either.
Okay, all right.
So I felt uncomfortable in there, but changes started to happen. And I started to go on missionary trips with the church. I was just being, a gopher. I was doing whatever needed to be done. And then that kind of taught me a lot about how God kind of works, because, when you're in another country on a mission and you see God move and there is no explanation to it, it really takes you to a higher level.
Can you give me an example of that? I mean, I love talking to missionaries because they're on the front lines and they do see things like that, like just inexplicable miracle type stuff.
We were scheduled to go to Ethiopia, Africa.
Okay.
And 2 days before the trip, the guy who was sponsoring, or not sponsoring, but helping us out, he canceled when he told us not to come.
Oh, wow.
So and there's like 30 of us, and our pastor said, well, we're going anyway because we have a job to do.
Wow.
So we went there. We're hanging out in the hotel. We have no agenda. So we're all just kind of hanging out, relaxing, and then we're all having dinner and stuff. We're praying before we eat. And then during lunch the next day, one of the two of the women, which I think one was named Tanya, one was named Michelle, they held hands to pray before lunch, and the waiter's like, oh, you're saved. He's like, yeah. So then we didn't know it, that would trigger this whole crusade that we would be on for the next 12 days. That literally, by the third day, we were playing in front of 3,000 people, and we ended the whole concerts that we were doing in the ministry, like a week and a half later, to over 10,000 people.
That is amazing. So you go there, the initial itinerary has been canceled, and God hooks you up with a waiter who connects you with someone else, I guess, who's doing a crusade and puts you in front of 10,000 people?
Yes.
So you go halfway around the world in faith, and this is what God does to reward your obedience and willingness to go.
Yes, and it was like a slow build. It was first like there were like 30 people because we went to a prayer meeting.
Wow.
Then there were 3,000 people, and then it was consistently 3,000 and up, and it ended with over 10. So we must have ministered about 100,000.
100,000 people.
I mean,
love
when you really, because we were doing 2 services a day too, so it was a lot.
That is amazing. Friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Fazina, and again, we're visiting with our special guest, Mr. Hubie Synn, who is not only an amazing accountant, but a prophet and a speaker, and now an author as well. His book is called The Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory. Well, Hubie, let's continue. We got a few minutes left in this segment, but again, I want to hear how your gift of prophecy developed.
Okay, well, I think because I started to serve in all areas, and at the church I was in the nursery, and then when we went on the mission field, I was carrying people's luggage and stuff like that, which it does wonders for your ego, But
well, Jesus said if you humble yourself, God will exalt you, and if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. So
yeah, well, I was pretty humbled, so
I love it.
So, but I was like, well, I'm here to do a purpose. I don't have any other thing, so I'll contribute this way. And then, I started to go on more missionary trips, and then we went to one in Sweden. And again, I sat in the back of the church, and I really didn't feel like I had much to offer. So, I was sitting in church, and then they all called us to the front to pray for people, and I was praying for this woman named Ulla. And as I'm praying, all of a sudden, this thing happens. It just like, this stuff starts to happen. It starts to come out of my mouth. And I have no idea what I'm saying, because I'm like, well, maybe I'm just interceding, that type of stuff. So, but it was English. It wasn't like I was speaking in tongues. So then she turned, she grabbed a hold of me, and she's crying and stuff. You know how you get like these wet spots on your chest, and and she looks at me with teary-eyed, and she goes, "How did you know?" And I went, "I didn't know. Praise God." So I said, "Okay." So I went and sat down, and I had no clue what it was. And then I went to a Michael Sweet concert, who he was the lead singer for
Stryper, old school. I love it.
Yes, yes, and they were very instrumental in getting me back saved.
Okay,
so, which was great because I love those guys. And I went to the concert, and God, in the way that He kind of directs things, He just kind of opened doors that I was able to meet the band and hang out with them and meet Michael. And Michael was kind of like it for me at that time. So I'm like, I got saved because of this man, and it was a dream to meet him and to hang out with him, because I had never met a celebrity before.
Wow.
And in my mind, he was kind of like at the top of the list.
Right.
So, I'm hanging out with them, and then we go out to eat, and we come back, and then, they put me on the side of the stage because I was kind of helping out. And then the bass player named Tracy Ferry, who actually is the bass player for the band Boston now, he was his bass player at the time, he's sitting in a chair on the side of the stage, and he looks at me and waves to me. So I was like, oh, okay. So, I sit down next to him, and I'm not feeling that well. It's kind of like my stomach's hurting a little. I'm thinking it's because of the meal I just had,
Unbeknownst to you, this is kind of how your gift works, right?
So Tracy waves me over. I sit down at the chair, and he puts his arm around me, and he goes, "What's a good word?" or "How you doing?" or something like that. And out all of a sudden, this thing starts coming out of my mouth. And I don't know what it is, but it's just, it's kind of just running.
You're just talking to him?
I'm just talking to him.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to realize what's going on. Maybe I'm praying for him, or I don't really know. And then he looks at me with his eyes all swollen, and he's kind of teary-eyed, and he goes, "Thanks, I really needed to hear that."
Wow. And you have no idea what you said, right?
Right. I mean, now I do, but back then I didn't. And he looked at his watch and says, "Gotta go." And I was like, well, that's strange. So he ran downstairs, and I was just sitting there like, okay. I went back to my seat and thought that was strange. But what I didn't know was that his wife had just had a baby, and it was really hurting him that he had to go on tour right after she had the baby. And God kind of comforted him.
Yeah, wow.
Wow.
That's awesome. Well, listen, Hubie, we want to get the rest of your story after the break. Again, friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio. We're talking with Hubie Synn. His new book is called The Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more on Divine Intervention Radio.
We'll be right back with more from Daniel Pazina and Divine Intervention right after this.
I believe in miracles.
Divine Intervention welcomes the support of Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants. Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants is a family-owned and operated Christian business serving their clients with quality accounting services for over 40 years, offering full-service accounting for any type of business, large or small, in any state of the union. Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants, 12 Oak Street, number 5, West Hampton Beach, New York, 11978. Phone 631-288-3334. That's 631-288-3334.
Hi, I'm Kevin McCullough. You may know me from Fox News Television or talk radio. I talk a lot about things that affect people's lives on a regular basis. And one of the things I've always wondered if people woke up wondering each morning is, could I work for myself? Could I find a business that would allow me to use the skills I have to pursue revenue that I need so that I can build a vision that I have? How would you like to be your own boss with no commute, no alarm clock, no employees or politics or compromises or discrimination? None of that educational requirement, but something positive that actually impacts people's lives. That's the opportunity of Ambit, an energy business that you can not only own now for less than $500, but make lots of money with. Call for your start today at 205-55-AMBIT. That's 205-55-AMBIT, or online at freepowernow.com.
Hey, this is Daniel Fazina of Divine Intervention Radio. The Bible contains some incredible stories of miracles and divine interventions. Jesus calmed a raging storm, healed paralytics, and even raised the dead. But are these types of events still happening today? The answer to this question, as you will see from reading my book, Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today, is an emphatic yes. Contained within the book is a collection of amazing true stories that attest to this fact. You will read the astonishing first-hand accounts of people who have been healed of paralysis, terminal cancer, and tumors through prayer. You will see the love of God powerfully transform the life of an Islamic terrorist. You will witness the liberation of the demon-possessed, the resurrection of the dead, and much more. Prepare to be awed and inspired as you experience divine intervention. More information about Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today can be found at www.divineinterventionradio.com or by calling 800-247-4784. That's 1-800-247-4784.
I'm at war with the world and they try to pull me into the dark. I struggle to find my faith as I'm snapping from your arms.
It's getting harder to stay awake, and my strength is fading fast. You breathe into me at last.
I'm awake, I'm alive. Now I know what I believe inside. Now it's my time. I'll do what I want, 'cause this is my life. Here, right now.
Welcome back to Divine Intervention Radio. I am your host, Daniel Fazina, and if you're just tuning in, we've been speaking with our special guest, Mr. Hubie Synn. He is an author and a prophet, and he's been telling us about how God has been using him and his prophetic gift.
Hubie, welcome back to Divine Intervention Radio. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again.
Thank you.
All right,
Good
no
to be-
problem. So before the break, Hubie, we were talking about how God was using you to not only on the mission field to pray for people, but also celebrities like the guys from the band Stryper. And your gift of prophecy was kind of developing. And then you had some pretty amazing divine appointments with some very influential people, the first being David Tyree, and then, of course, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. Can you tell us those stories? Because those are really amazing.
Okay, well, before the David Tyree story happened, my wife and I, we were doing well in the corporate world, but our family was a mess, and because we were working all the time.
Ah, okay.
And our marriage wasn't doing that great either. Matter of fact, we were fighting all the time. So what we did was, one day I went to work, and the Lord kind of time went from down a lot, and the time from my work went up a lot. And he told me that, I needed to get my priorities straight. So what I did was, I'm there, and I'm just kind of praying and thinking about it, and the Lord told me to quit my job.
Don't you love when he does that?
Yeah. And
all right, time to walk in faith now.
Yeah, it's kind of like over the faith thing, and I was just sitting there like, oh, well, my first thought was, how am I going to tell my wife this? I mean, my job, I always wanted to become a very important person in work, take a company that was small and stuff, and all that was happening. And I was the CFO, and things were really moving along. We were dressing all the stars, and, we're making all of the beautiful dresses for all the designers, and it was a great, fun job. And so, it kind of was like, okay, well, it wasn't really my identity, so it was easier to leave, but, I was like, well, I'm going to tell my wife our income's going to drop so much.
Yeah, it's still not easy.
Right. So, I drove home, and I'm like, well, Lord, I just kind of, and it was a long drive. It seemed like it was taking forever. And I walked through the door, and I said, honey, I need to quit my job. And she looked at me, and she goes, yes, you do.
Oh, wow. That's good confirmation there.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then after that, time went on, and the Lord told her to quit her job. And then, which our income dropped significantly even more. And then he threw a monkey wrench in there, and God has such a sense of humor that he said, and by the way, you're going to have another child, and we had 4 already. So
wow.
It was kind of God kind of rearranging our family life. And then I was kind of looking for work because I didn't know what to do. I didn't really have a job lined up. And, because I'm a CPA by trade, a lot of clients came back to me, and some people wanted me to work with them. So I met this financial advisor, and his client was David Tyree. And so, one day he took me to David's house, and,
Now, for those who aren't familiar, who is David Tyree?
David Tyree, he was a wide receiver for the Giants. He played in Super Bowl 42. He was the one that made the quote-unquote helmet catch, which is considered the greatest catch in Super Bowl history.
Oh, wow. Now, when you met him, though, this is before that, right?
Yes, when I met him, he was injured. He wasn't even playing.
Okay.
And, I didn't really know who he was. I just kind of just sat at the table for a little bit, and then, we went back to the office, and as we went back to the office, the Lord's telling me to pray for him, and I'm like, well, I'm a Jet fan. Okay. Yeah.
Gotta love that.
Yeah, so I'm praying for him, and I don't really know where it's leading to, but I'm praying for the man. I know nothing about him, and I just know that he's injured. And then the Lord, told me I need to call him, and I didn't really know, I guess, how to understand the prompting because I really didn't do it before. And so the Lord is really on me. I can't get any sleep. I'm getting restless. I'm getting anxious. So finally I was like, okay. I'm kind of having this conversation with the Lord. Okay, I took his number, and I said, okay, I'll call him Friday. Because if I call Friday and something happens, then at least I got the weekend to kind of deal with it. And it was crossing the professional line because I'm his accountant. So
okay.
That was kind of a situation. So, I waited till it was like 8:30 at night after I ate dinner, came up from work, ate dinner, and then I went down in the basement with my phone. And I called the number, and, 1 ring, 3 rings. I'm like, okay, well, maybe it'll go to the answering machine, But literally I'm shaking because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even know why I'm calling this guy. So then he picks up the phone and says, hi, this is David. And I went, he goes, hello? And I went, hi, this is Hubie. He was like, who? I went, Hubie, the accountant, the one you just met. He's like, yeah, how you doing, man? Because they didn't even really know who I was. So, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, I got something to tell you. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then it just kind of came out, kind of what happened with, here. And it went on for quite a while, and then all of a sudden there was this silence on the phone. And I was like, oh, this is not good. So then, I said, David, are you there? And he's like, yeah. I just don't know what to say. And I went, this is bad. This is very bad. He doesn't know what to say. And, all of a sudden your mind just kind of goes crazy. And he says, my wife and I were praying a lot about a lot of things, and a lot of things that we were praying about you just gave us answers to.
Wow.
I went, okay. And he goes, and my dream is to be known as a wide teams guy. I was like, okay. And he goes, you said a lot there that really meant a lot. I went, okay. And he goes, and you said a lot of things that are pretty big, which was something like God was going to give him a platform to share the gospel, which is really what he wanted to do.
Right.
but because he was a backup player or a special teams player, he didn't have all the publicity and stuff that other people did. So, he got back on the field and proceeded to have his worst possible season that he could. He dropped everything, and it was just bad. And then, we kept praying for him. His mother died, and we kept praying for him. It was very emotionally pretty tough for him.
Right.
And then, when the Super Bowl came, the practice before, he dropped every single pass thrown to him in practice, which probably did wonders for his confidence. And then, and during the Super Bowl, Eli almost got sacked. He threw the ball in the air, basically just heaved it in the middle of the field, which is kind of like a big no-no. David jumps up, grabs it. Rodney Harrison hits the ball out of his hands because he caught it with both hands, and it hits his helmet, and David, I guess, used his hand to pin the ball against his helmet, and Rodney slams him to the ground when they fall down, and he held on to the ball, and because of that, because it was third down, because of that catch, they were able to kind of finish it off with a winning touchdown to Plaxico Burress, and they won the Super Bowl.
Yes, and that play has gone down as the greatest single catch in Super Bowl history. I mean, that's incredible. And you had said something to him prior to this that he would be, basically what you prophesied to him, part of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that he would be raised to a national level where he'll have a big platform to share the gospel, right?
Yes, and he'll be known as a wide receiver. And all of that came true, but you never would have guessed that's what it would have been.
That's amazing.
So the prophecy fit, but you could have never imagined that's really what it would have been.
Wow. So here's a guy coming off of an injury, coming off of relative obscurity, not playing well, and then this one play changes everything. And he's thrust into the national spotlight.
Super Bowl in history.
Yeah, wow. Incredible. And it's just amazing how God works. Now, through this event and through you meeting with David and sharing this prophecy with him and having it come true, God also opened the door for you to connect to Rabbi Jonathan Cahn in a major way. Tell us that story.
Okay, well, David wrote a book, and when he wrote a book, he wrote it for a company called Charisma. And, and in his book, he met the owner of the company, who was Stephen Strang. And David put me in his book, and only on one page, which was fine with me, because at that time I didn't want any fanfare. I kind of ran from it, actually. So I met Steve Strang through the fact that David had, told the story of what had happened and also included it in his book. So one day I was getting ready to go to Texas to fly, and, my sister's not doing well, so I'm going to see her because she's very sick, and I booked my flight for a Friday, and it was the beginning of October, so I was kind of dealing with deadlines, and there was this terrible rainstorm, so my flight kept getting bumped, and when it got bumped to very late at night, I was flying to Dallas. They told me, well, you could fly into to Charlotte, and I was like, well, where's my connection? And they go, there is no connection till tomorrow morning, so I'm like, so I fly to Charlotte, and I stay there all night. Who wants to do that? So I told them to book me in the first flight on Saturday morning, which they did. And then, I get to the airport early, and I land in Charlotte. So I dart for Starbucks to get coffee because I'm, really tired. And then I go, and, of course, the gate is packed because of the weather. And, there's one seat next to the window, and I'm like, do I really want to sit here? So I sit next to the window. The sun is coming up behind me because I think it was probably 6:30 or something. I can't get any sleep. I'm trying to drink coffee. I got my headphones on. I don't want anybody bothering me. And all of a sudden, I feel this nudge from the Lord, and he's like, look to your right. I look to my right, and there's this Orthodox guy, dressed in black, beard. And I was like, oh, okay. I noticed him. So then I went back to drinking my coffee and just listening to my music, trying to relax. And then all of a sudden the Lord nudges me again. So I was like, oh, he's nudging me to kind of talk to him. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. So I'm trying to ignore it. like you can really ignore God. That doesn't work. So the nudges keep going. So finally it's like, okay, I'm having this conversation. Okay. So I turn to my right, and I see the guy is reading a little book. So I nonchalantly kind of lean back in my chair, and I kind of turn and look over his shoulder, and he's reading Proverbs. So I was like, see, Lord, it's Old Testament. I said, I got nothing to do with this guy. He's Orthodox. He's reading Proverbs. I got nothing to say to him. So then the Lord is kind of just really on me, so I turn again, and when I look, he kind of slides down the chair, and he's praying, but as he's praying, he's kind of like moving back and forth with his hands up. Not really high, but halfway up. And I'm like, Lord, he's Orthodox. That's the way they pray, in Israel. So I was like, I got nothing to say to this guy. So then, I'm trying to ignore God, and like you really can. So I'm trying to ignore him. All of a sudden, I start to get sick, and the way my gift works is that's kind of like my check. The Lord just kind of keeps nudging me. So I was like, okay, at least I can do is test this out, even though I didn't really want to. So, I put my headphones away, I put my coffee down, and I turn to him, and I go, what's the good word? And the man looks at me, and he turns, and he goes, God loves you. I went, okay. All right, I got something to start with. Okay. I know that. So we just start chatting. He goes, what do you do? I said, well, I'm an accountant. What do you do? Well, I'm in ministry. And we kind of were nonchalant about it. And then, they call us for our flight. And so it's like, nice talking to you, nice talking to you. All of a sudden, the Lord's like, now. And I know it's now because it feels like somebody's ready to, I'm starting to lose my breath and my stomach's hurting. And I look him square in the eye and I said, look, you can't get up yet. And he goes, no. And he's already halfway up. And I said, no, I need to tell you something. So he sits down and I go, God wants you to know. And then out comes this really long word. And the man is just staring at me. I mean, it's a dead stare. And I'm like, this is not good, So afterwards, he looks at me and he goes, you're on this flight. I went, yes. He goes, okay, when we go up on that flight, I'm going to come find you. And I went, what? Find me? What are you going to come find me for? He goes, what you said, it's so important. You have no idea. It has for the country. It's for life. It's for, you have no idea the magnitude of it. And I'm like, you're right, because I don't even know what I said, because my gift works. I don't know what I say. It just comes out. He's like, so you need to tell me again. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. He goes, what do you mean? I said, it doesn't work that way. I don't know what I said. It just doesn't. It just comes and it happens. So he's like, well, look, let's get on our flight so we don't miss it. I'm going to come find you. Right now I can't sleep on the flight. Now I'm tired. So I'm, and I have an aisle seat, which is my favorite seat. So I'm like, well, maybe he won't find me, So we get to the cruising altitude, and then he comes walking down. He has a pen at it, and he's got this smile on his face, and he stops and taps me on the shoulder and says, let's go to the back. And I'm like, where are we going? It's a packed flight. Where are we going to the back for? So he takes us he leads me to the back, and lo and behold, there's 2 seats next to the galley. And I was like, great. So we sit in, he pulls down the tray table, gets his pad on it, gets his pen, and he turns to me and he goes, okay, tell me again. And I went, it doesn't work that way. He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, it just happens. I don't know. It's not on demand. So he goes, so let's pray. So, we're both praying, and, we're praying in tongues, and I'm sure people around us started to give us a weird look, And then all of a sudden it starts to come out, so he starts writing everything down. And
now, you didn't know at the time what you were saying, but you've subsequently learned what it was. And tell us, what was it basically that you were prophesying to this man?
Basically, God told him that he had given him the book that he had written. He had never written a book before, but he had written it. God basically told him that, the book was going to do very well. He told him that his life was going to change in a very drastic way. That God told him that he gave him the book, that, time was going to be an issue. God was raising him up. God was going to put the correct people around him to help him, and that his life was going to change, and he would have another child.
And that
book that happened.
That book that you mentioned became The Harbinger, which was published by Charisma House. And again, Jonathan Cahn had never written a book before. He didn't have a publicist, didn't have an agent, nothing like that. And when that book came out, within the first week, it hit the New York Times bestseller list and changed the nation. I mean, it's gone to the halls of Congress, and gone to people in power, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list for like a year or more straight, which is practically unheard of, especially, if you don't have an agent or a publicist or anything like that. This was a book that was written, by the hand of God, I think, and really went out to the nation as a warning for America. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you check it out, The Harbinger by Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. And friend, we're visiting right now on Divine Intervention Radio with Hubie Synn, the prophet who gave Jonathan this word. Now, Hubie, since you met with Jonathan and The Harbinger came out, things have really changed for you as well and really blown up. Your new book is out now, The Tales of a Wandering Prophet. How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory, where you chronicle your story and also how you met with David Tyree and with Jonathan Cahn. But what has God done since your meeting with Jonathan? How has your life changed?
Well, first, I guess for the first year and a half, nothing happened, which was fine. And then, he started telling people about me, and then everybody knew the name. But, I would go to his congregation. We were going to his church pretty steady, and, it was fine. Nobody knew who I was. And then they asked me to do a short interview on the Harbinger Decoded DVD. And when I did that, that's when life started to change because everybody saw what I looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after that, I got an invitation to go on the Jim Bakker show, which was my first time on TV. And then
that's a big show for your first time.
Exactly. And then after that, I got asked to go to Daystar, and I was on Marcus and Joni's show and also Joni Table Talk. And then it's just escalated from there. There's been numerous articles there in magazines and stuff, and there's been more TV appearances, and there's been, a lot of things that's happening. And when they came to us about the book, my wife and I, initially I said no, because I said, well, I'm not a writer. And then Charisma, who published David's book, and also The Harbinger, they came back to me and they go, you really need to reconsider. So my wife and I reconsidered, and we prayed about it, and God told us to write the book, so we wrote the book. And, it came out in June. It took us a year to write because, we'd never done this before. And it's just had so many testimonies of helping people because, it kind of breaks everything down in very simple terms of how somebody who everybody kind of figured that likely this has happened.
Right.
And it's kind of built around that scripture that God makes room for your gift. And literally, I just want to stress, I didn't really do anything. I did what God told me to do, but all the other stuff about the deal and the interviews and being on TV and stuff, I didn't do anything. They all called me.
That's amazing. And it's
interesting.
Yeah, your story is really compelling, and I love the book because it does have a lot of kind of God moments and incidents in there where God told you to do a certain thing, and then you prayed for someone or you gave them something, and it was just a real confirmation of what they needed. And it's just a testimony of how, God can use an ordinary man to really impact a lot of people. It's really about obedience, I think, and you really demonstrate that in your book with some of the stories in there. Again, friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Fazina, and we're visiting with my good friend Hubie Synn. His new book is called The Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory. It's wonderfully written, very encouraging book, so I highly recommend you pick it up. It is with Charisma House Publishers, as Hubie mentioned. Also, they published David Tyree. They also published Jonathan Cahn. And they published my book as well, Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today. So, Hubie, why don't you tell us a couple of the little anecdotes and stories from your book about, how God used you to minister to different people and how your gift flowed through you during this time?
Oh, well, I guess really the one that really encourages me was when we went through our very difficult time, we had kind of hung on to a song called Made Me Glad, which was from Hillsong. And
okay.
At that time, it was a very big hit, and it was written by a woman named Merriam-Webster. And so, my wife was kind of trying to decide whether she should have the next child, which was the fifth one, because we weren't really sure really what was going on. And, God had given me names for all the babies, so the fifth one, he gave me a name, Miriam Joy. So we went to the doctor, and, we went to sonogram, and it turns out that the girl that we thought turned out to be a boy.
Ah.
My wife.
A little surprise.
Yeah, we're kind of like, did we make the biggest mistakes of our lives? So, the boy came, he was born, and it was great. And during that time, we were praying for the baby's health, for the baby's, calling, for the baby, for God to touch the baby's life, and all this. And it was just covering the baby from everything, protection and everything. And then my wife one day said, you know what? I met this woman, Merriam-Webster. I sent her an email, which ministered to her, but it was a year later. So then my wife's like, well, why don't you ask Miriam what her middle name is? Because we never got to the bottom of Miriam Joy. So I emailed her, and I said, by the way, what is your middle name? And she kind of had question marks, and then she goes, my middle name is Joy. Why? And I was like, I explained to her that we had spent all this time praying for the baby, and what we prayed specifically was for her health, for protection, for the call on her life and stuff like that. And she sent back this really emotional email saying that's exactly what was going on in my life at that time. And there's no way you could have known that. So in actuality, we were actually interceding for her. And she's all the way across the world. She's in Australia. We hadn't met yet. And God, using us, we were actually covering her that time when she was going through this very difficult time in her life.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And there's your book, The Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory, are full of these type of stories. So it's very encouraging. Again, I highly recommend you pick it up. It is by Hubie Synn, who is our special guest today. And Hubie, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us on Divine Intervention Radio, sharing your testimony and kind of giving us an update about what God is doing with you and with your book. So I just want to encourage you to keep following him, keep being salt and light, and keep serving him.
Well, thank you for your time, and I appreciate you having me here. And the great thing about, I guess, everything that's kind of happened to me is I get to meet great people, and I'm really glad that we've become friends through this. So I'm really blessed in a lot of ways.
Amen. Me too, man. The feeling is definitely mutual. Well, friend, thank you again for tuning in. I'm Daniel Fazina, your host. You've been listening to Divine Intervention Radio. Our special guest has been Mr. Hubie Synn. Again, check out his book, The Tales of a Wandering Prophet, How God Can Use Anyone for His Purpose and Glory. Hope this episode of Divine Intervention has encouraged you, let you know that God is real, He loves you, and He's still doing miracles and working through His people. God willing, we'll see you again next week for another exciting episode of Divine Intervention Radio. Take care and God bless.
You've been listening to Divine Intervention with your host, Daniel Fazina. You can email Daniel at divineintervention@mail.com. That's divineintervention@mail.com. All programs of Divine Intervention are available online at divineinterventionradio.com. That's divineinterventionradio.com. Join us next time here on Divine Intervention.
I believe in miracles.
Hi, I'm Kevin McCullough. You may know me from Fox News or Talk Radio. Have you ever wondered or pondered the idea of working for yourself or owning your own business? Using your skills to build a vision or a passion for your own life? Think about it. No boss, no politics, no compromise, no commute, no employees, no discrimination, and no educational requirements. Just building something positive that impacts people's lives. Well, you can get started owning your own energy company for less than $500. Would you like to know how? It's through a great company called Ambit. You can find out more when you go to freepowernow.com. That's freepowernow.com. Or if you're really interested in getting started, call my good friend Daniel Fazina, an independent energy consultant with Ambit. He's ready to help you get started on a brand new career. 205-55-AMBIT. That's 205-55-AMBIT or freepowernow.com.
Divine Intervention welcomes the support of Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants. Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants is a family-owned and operated Christian business serving their clients with quality accounting services for over 40 years, offering full-service accounting for any type of business, large or small, in any state of the union. Latirzo Associates, Certified Public Accountants, 12 Oak Street, number 5, West Hampton Beach, New York, 11978. Phone 631-288-3334. That's 631-288-3334.